Alright, so for this chapter project, we're going to be building a PHP MySQL quiz. Alright, so it's going to be pretty simple. Basically, it's going to pull questions from a database, and it's going to pull the choices for each question from a database, and it'll include the right and wrong choices, and we'll code the logic behind the score, and which one's right, which ones are wrong, and things like that. So it's not going to have a big admin page with CRUD with create, read, and update and delete, but we will have a very simple form where we can add questions to the database through the browser, all right, as opposed to just manually sticking them in the database. All right, so what we're going to do first is create our database. Now, if you've been following along, then you have XAMPP installed, and as long as your server is running, you should be able to go to localhost/phpMyAdmin and click on databases, and we're just going to create a new database here called Quizzer. Okay, so that's just the fake name that I've given to this application. And we're going to have two tables here. We're going to have a questions table and a choices table. Okay, so let's create questions, and this is only going to have two columns. Now, we're going to have a primary key for the first field here, so I'm going to go to index primary. I'm not going to choose auto increment, which is kind of different than what we usually do. Most of the time you'll have an ID for the primary key, and it'll auto increment, and the ID will increase after each entry is entered. Alright, but in this case, we want each question to be bound by a question number. Okay, so question 2 should always be question 2. And if we were to do auto increment and then delete a question, things would get all messed up. So this isn't going to be auto increment. Alright, so, and I'm not even going to call it ID, I'm going to call it question number. And it's going to be an int. We'll give it 11 for maximum length. And then the next field is just going to be the text of the question, which will be text. Okay, so very, very simple table. Let's save that. Alright, so now we want to create the choices table, which will have 4 columns. Okay, so we'll have an ID, and this will have an auto increment. It'll be the primary key. We'll put 11 here. Okay, so the next field is going to be a foreign key for the questions table, and this is going to be question number. Okay, so this here is how we're going to connect the question to its choices. Okay, this will be an int as well, 11. Okay, the next one is going to be basically a true-false value. So we're going to call this is correct, just so we know which choice is correct. And this is going to be a tiny int and only have 1 character. Okay, we also want to set a default for this. Okay, so each question will have about 3 or 4 incorrect answers and 1 correct answer. So I figured that we should put 0 or no for the default. Alright, and then if it is correct, that'll have a 1. Alright, and then the last field here is going to be just the text for the choice. Okay, we'll choose text, and that's it. That's it for our database. Very simple, really nice for an early project. Alright, so let's put this aside for now and go to our htdocs folder, and we're going to create a new project folder called Quizzer. Okay, so like always, what I like to do first is the UI, is the user interface and all the display elements. So let's create our files. Do an index. Actually, we want to do index.php. And let's have a CSS folder. Now, the structure of this application isn't going to be, it's not going to be complicated. We're just going to just throw all our files in here. As we go on with our projects, the structure will get more complicated and be more semantic. So I'm going to go ahead and open up index PHP. I'm just going to use Notepad for this project. Alright, so let's just paste in, we're not going to use any frameworks or anything, or any complicated design. It's just going to be very simple, very plain, very clean. Alright, so let's just indent this a little here. Okay, so we'll give it a title, call it PHP Quizzer. Alright, so in the body, actually let's link our CSS file. So CSS, and we're going to call it style.css. Okay, let's create that file. Whoop, I created a folder. Well, let's open that up with Notepad++. Alright, so now we have our style sheet linked. First thing I want to do here is create a header. I'm going to use the HTML5 elements here. Alright, and then we're going to use a div. We're going to use a container class. Basically, the container class is going to push everything in the middle and give it a fixed width. Alright, and inside of here I just want an h1 tag. I'm going to call it PHP Quizzer. Alright, so that'll give us our header. Next we're going to have the main area, so we'll use the HTML5 main tag. And we want a container here as well. Alright, let's see, H2. Alright, let's go down here and create the footer. And in the footer, we'll have a container. And inside the container, we're just going to have a copyright. Fake copyright, of course. Not OHO, PHP. Alright, so let's just open that up. So we can go to localhost/Quizzer. Alright, so here it is so far. Doesn't look very good. Let's add a little bit of style to this. So in our style sheet, let's start with the body. And I'm going to give this a font family of Arial. And then font size will be a little bigger than usual, 15 pixels, and then we'll give it a line height of 1.6 m, and that should be good for the body. Okay, so list items, I always take off the bullet, list style none, and also links, I hate the underline, I always get rid of the underline. So text decoration is going to be none. Alright, let's see what else. The container, so So basically the container is going to have a width. I want this to be responsive because I want this to look good and run on mobile devices. So I'm going to give it a width of 60% instead of a fixed width. Margin, we want it all to be pushed to the middle, so we're going to do margin 0 on the top and bottom, and then auto on the left and right. And then finally we'll add an overflow of auto, and that's good for the container. Let's see, the header. I'm going to give a border on the bottom of 3 pixels. We'll make it light gray. Oh. And solid. And then the footer, we'll give it a border on the top. Basically the same thing as the header. And then for the main, which is basically the main body, we're going to have, I just want to add a padding to the bottom of 20 pixels. Alright, let's see if that changed at all. Alright, so that's looking better. For the footer, let's align that to the center. And we'll put a little margin on the top as well. I'm sorry, a padding. Oh. Okay. And by the way, the index page is basically just going to be an intro for the quiz, and then we'll have a start button which will go to the actual quiz page. Okay, so let's add a few more things here. Inside of the main area, under the H2 tag, let's add a paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to say this is a multiple choice quiz to test your knowledge of PHP. Okay, and then we're going to have a list underneath. Okay, so we're just going to have some information here. First one being the number of questions, which I'm going to put in a strong tag. Okay, and we're going to put here 5. Now this is going to change in the future. I'm going to have it generate dynamically from the database. Basically, it'll count the number of questions and output it here. Alright, let me just copy this. Okay, the next one is going to be just the type of quiz, and that's just going to be static text called multiple choice. Alright, and then the estimated time of the test. And this, I'm actually going to take the number of questions and divide them so that it's about 30 seconds per question. But for right now, let's just say 4 minutes. And then finally, we want to have a link to start the quiz. Okay, this is going to go to questions or question.php. Give it a class so we can style it. Alright, now we want to go to question.php, but we want to make sure that we go to the first question. So we're going to have a get variable here called n, and that's going to stand for number. Okay, so it's going to say n equals 1. So we know that we're at question number 1. Okay, so let's save that. Alright, looks good. Obviously, if we start, nothing comes up because we don't have this question.php page yet. Let's just style this button a little bit. Okay, so let's go down here, and there's a link with the class of start. And let's start by setting it to inline block. And the color will be dark gray. And then the background will be a light gray. Border, we'll say 1 pixels dotted, and that should be kind of a light gray. And then finally padding 6 and 13. Alright, so that looks a lot better. Alright, so our index interface is complete. So next we want to build the question.php file. Okay, so we'll open this up, and basically I'm going to copy everything from the index page because we want the same layout. Alright, so let's get rid of pretty much everything in the body from within the container. Get rid of that. Now I want to have some text that tells us the question we're on. Okay, so I'm going to create a div with the class of current. Okay, and in this current div, we're basically going to say question, we'll say question 1 of 5, and this will be dynamically generated as well. But just for now, we'll just do that. Alright, so under that, we're going to have a paragraph, and this is going to have a class of question. Okay, and then inside of there, we're going to have our text. For now, I'm just going to add static static text. So I'm going to just paste in a question. What does PHP stand for? Alright, and then underneath the paragraph, we're going to start the form. And the form is going to be post. Okay, method equals post. And then for the action, basically the page that we want to send the form to is going to be called process.php. Alright, so that should be good. Alright, so what we want here is an unordered list for our multiple choice. The unordered list is going to have a class of choices. Alright, and in here we're going to have an input. Input name is going to be choice, and then the type. Oh, what did I do here? The type is going to be radio, Let's see what else. Value. The value is going to be equal to the ID of the ID of the question. So I'm just going to put in 1 for now. And that's good for the input. And then I'm just going to paste in the text question. Alright, so let's just copy this. Alright, and I'm just going to change up the answers a little bit here, just for display. Oh. Private home page. Personal home page. And just change this to personal hypertext preprocessor. Alright, so let's check this out. So we want to go, let's click start, brings us to question.php. Okay, so that's good. We do obviously need a button. Alright, so let's go back and right under the UL closing tag, let's add a button. Input type is going to be submit, and then the value we'll say submit, and that's good. Okay, I want to give a little style to this question 1 of 5, so let's go back here and current. I'm just going to paste this in because we're running out of time. Okay, so basically gave it some padding, gave it a background. Alright, so that looks better. So I'm going to stop here, and then in the next video we'll continue with the user interface, and then we'll move on to the actual PHP coding.